was in charge, where I was the general manager of my life, and I would run my life into the ground. I mean, I did that, gosh, I should have probably been fired as general manager when I was like 5. I mean, there was clearly something wrong with me. I can remember as a kid, I constantly felt dis-ease, like disconnected, not really that I could fit in. I felt like, I don't know, I didn't belong. I didn't belong anywhere. And I've done inventory, and I think I've figured out where I got this idea. My mom, whenever she was pregnant, she would tell this story, that it took her years to get pregnant, and she got pregnant with me, and she was sick every day of her pregnancy. She would throw up every single day. And then when she went into labor, she was in labor for 3 days before they took me by C-section. It was the most horrible, painful days of her life. And then she had me. And she said that the doctor came in after she had me, and the doctor said, "Would you do it again?" And my mom was like, "Absolutely, I would do it again." And what I heard her say was, "That child's not good enough. I need to have another kid." What she meant was, oh my God, I'd go through all that pain and horror just to have that child again. I hear what I want to hear, right? Like, so much so, I was telling Jen this earlier, like my husband, he'll say something and then he'll say, "Can you repeat that back to me? I want to make sure you heard what I said." I have this problem in my mind that it's not really what you say or what you think. It's what I think that you said or what I think that you think. Like I have some sort of supernatural power, right? And so even in grade school, I can remember I would watch other people and I would see like how they would act, and I would listen to how they would talk. I would try to be who it was that I thought you wanted me to be in order to fit in. And I never quite felt like I fit in, probably because I deep down knew I was just playing some character. Like I wasn't being the person that I was supposed to be. So when I was 14 and I was at this, I like to say that it was a nightclub. Again, delusion in my mind. It was actually like an old warehouse where they played loud music for underage people. It was a nightclub. And people were standing outside and they were drinking Boone's Farm wine. Do you have Boone's Farm? Yes. You are my people. You are my people. Yes. So I'm watching them, and they're drinking their Boone's Farm in a circle, which isn't that interesting. I don't know. Did you guys drink in circles around here? We drink a lot in circles. Anyway, so they're drinking the Boone's Farm, and I'm watching them, and I want to feel like they look. Because they look like they're having a good time. They look like they're at ease in their skin, and I'm like, I want to feel like that too. So they pass me the bottle, and I take a drink. Now, if you've had Boone's, you know that it never was from a farm. Like, I don't know where it came from, but it could not have been a farm. So I put it in my mouth, and it's awful, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to swallow this, but if I don't swallow it, what are they going to think? Oh, my gosh, I have to. If I spit it out, they're going to... And so I swallow it, right? And that's within, like, a quarter of a second. My mind thinks real quick. And so I drink it, and it was hot going down my throat. It, like, really burned, and I'm already thinking, like, oh, I can't do that again. And then it hit that spot. Like, I got, like, warm and fuzzy, and I felt like I could breathe. And I didn't even know I was holding my breath, you know? And so they passed that bottle around, and I continued to drink that night, and it ended like all the other times that I've drank in my life. I ended up throwing up, this time in the backseat of my best friend Dad's brand new Jeep Cherokee. Now, I will say it was down some hilly, windy roads, but I threw up everywhere, and I remember going into their house, and it's funny, I think that God along the way in my life has always brought people into my life, whether I can see it or not. Now, looking back, what happened that night was I was in her parents' bedroom. We were talking, and her dad tells me that he's a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not an alcoholic. Like, this is the first time that I drank. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, and it felt pretty good, right? Like, I love the effect produced by alcohol. I never quite acquired a taste for alcohol. but I love what it did to me. So I quickly went from Boone's Farm Wine to Jack Daniels, because Jack could get me where I wanted to go quickly, and I could chase it with a Coca-Cola. I don't know why anybody would mix that stuff. Like, just get it in and be done. Like, I don't know what's wrong with you people. And so when I graduated from high school, I did not want to go to college. It's not that I didn't want to go to college per se to learn. I just couldn't imagine living in a dorm with other women. Because I knew that if I lived in close quarters with other women, they would get to know me. And if they got to know me, there was no way that they were going to like me, because I hated me. So there was just no way. And so I ended up going to a technical school, although later on I lived in really close quarters with other women against my will. And we got real close. Anyway, so I went to a technical school, and I ended up getting a job right out of that technical school. And I thought that was it. I thought once I got, once I was an adult, quote unquote, I had a real job, I had a truck, and everything was good, but I still felt something just wasn't right. I felt that dis-ease. Here I am doing everything that you're supposed to do, and I still just don't feel right. And I took a midnight shift job. I would get off at 7 a.m., and there was one bar that would open, because it was steel country. Steel mills were still open back then. And so there, 7 a.m., and I'm saddling up to the bar. The bartender always tried to find drinks that I thought would taste good. It never worked. It always, back to Jack. And so I did that for a little while, and then I got the idea that maybe the problem's Pennsylvania. Now, if you've ever been to Pennsylvania, it's gray for 6 months out of the year. It rains a lot. It's kind of an awful place. And I thought, if I could just get out of here, I'd be much better. That's it. I just got to leave. And so I sent out some applications, and 3 weeks later, I rented a U-Haul. I got a job in North Carolina, and I thought, this is it. I've arrived. And I remember the look on my parents' face, especially my mom. She was like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? She didn't say that, but I could just see that look on her face. What are you, I don't understand. That wasn't the first time I got that look from her, by the way. And so I moved to North Carolina, and I got a job, and then I got a better job, and I bought a brand new house on a lake, and I got new vehicles, and on the outside, it looked as if my life was going great. If you'd asked my parents, they would have told you that they were very proud of me, that I was a sales rep, that I was doing good things. What they couldn't see was that if you were a sales rep, I would fly into a city, kind of like this weekend. I would fly there, I would be on for an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then I'd get on another plane and I'd fly to another city, which was great for somebody like me. I can be on, quote unquote, for about an hour, maybe 2. And then I would get what I needed from the liquor store. I'd go back to the hotel room, and I would drink myself to sleep, and then I'd get on another plane, and I'd go to another city. So nobody really knew me. I didn't have any close friends that would know who I was. I could tell you who I was and what was going on, but I only told you half truths, right? And so I was making 6 figures, and I foreclosed on my house in North Carolina and had to come home. And so my parents are starting to see now that maybe there is a little bit of a problem, right? So I moved home for a little while, and then I convinced my boss that I really would thrive at the beach, because I think that the beach is the place to go. And I'll be honest, at this point in my life, I worked hard, and I worked hard because I needed the money, because I needed to drink. I'd also picked up some non-conference approved dry goods along the way that helped me drink a little more, so I needed the money, right? So I would work well for a period of time so that I could do what I wanted to do. And so he said, sure, we'll move you to Virginia. So I moved to Virginia, and I was named the #1 sales rep in my region. And I'll tell you, alcoholism doesn't care. It does not care about that. And it was just, my life was on fast motion, driving it into the ground at that point. Because 3 months later, I'm the #1 sales rep, and we were talking about coordination, right? So here's a story about my lack of coordination. So we're flying home from a convention. I got my boss's boss. We're all on the plane. We all fly a lot, so we'd been upgraded to first class. What do you get in first class? You get free drinks. Now, my parents, they are not alcoholic. Like, they can have a bottle of wine, take a glass, put the cork back in it, and put it in the refrigerator, and it goes bad. I don't understand that kind of thing, right? But if they were flying first class and it was free, they'd probably drink too. So I had to drink it, right? It was free. And so as we were on this plane, I accidentally fell out of my chair. Because I think that can happen to anybody, right? Like, I mean, you got somebody, anybody? No. And I didn't do it just once, not twice, but 3 times. I fell into the aisle, and my boss had to pick me up and put me back in that seat. Now, shortly after that, they asked me not to work for them anymore. Can you believe that? Now, I would have told you know, then and probably 6 or 7 years into sobriety that Medicare reimbursements had gone down in the medical field, and that's why they let me go. No, they let me go because I'm a drunk, and I was, you know, falling over. Like, they fired me, and so I'm living at the beach, and I really don't know what to do. Like, I can't really pay my rent. I mean, the thought of getting another job never really crossed my mind either, which is kind of crazy. Like, that never... I knew that I wasn't going to pass any pre-employment anything, so that just thought didn't cross my mind. But what did cross my mind, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm in a fix, like, I have good ideas. Really good ideas. And so this company that I work for, they had given me stock when I started, and when they fired me, I still got the stock. I was fully vested in the stock. And I thought, I'll just cash in some stock, and then I'll figure it out, right? Because that's what I can live one day at a time. Like, so I cash in the stock, and I continue to, you know, go to the liquor store, go to the hood, come back, because that's what my life had become. Like, I live on a love seat. Like, I don't even go upstairs to the bed. Like, I live on that love seat. And I drink and I do other things until I can just nod out and then come to and continue to do it again. I mean, I can remember my parents, now they kind of are, they've clued in that something's wrong with their daughter, right? And I remember my mom would call, and I wouldn't answer because I don't want to talk to anybody. And she would leave messages on my phone, and she would say, if you don't call me back, I'm going to have the state police come to your house so I can find out if you're alive or dead. And I remember I would get those messages, and I would be livid. How dare she? Like, I'm not hurting anybody but myself. I'm not even there. I didn't see the terror and the fear and the bewilderment that I brought to my parents. I mean, my poor parents, they suffered from this disease called alcoholism, right? I brought alcoholism into their household. They didn't know the depths of the pain that they could suffer until me, right? And so anyway, so I cash in that money, and I go through it pretty quick, and I'm back in what am I going to do now? And so it was around tax season. I thought I'll cash in, I'll do my taxes. I'll get my tax return. It'll all be good. Now, I didn't know, I go to do my taxes. I didn't know that when you cash in stock, here's my only stock tip, my only tax tip I'll give you. You're supposed to pay taxes on them. Like, I didn't know that. Or maybe I did and I lied to myself. I was good at that too. And so what happened was I owed the IRS $100,000. So I didn't file my taxes that year. Or for a few years to come, I tell you. So I pick up the phone and, I call my parents and I said, I need to come home. And they said, okay, because I have good parents. Like, they loved me no matter what. And they said, we got 2 conditions. 1, you got to get a job. And number 2, you need to get sober. Like, get help. And I was like, okay. And I remember going home, like driving the U-Haul home and thinking to myself, this is it. Like, I'm going to get sober. This is my last move. I've moved enough. I'm going to get my life back together. And I get home and I did one of the 2 things, right? I ended up getting 2 jobs because I couldn't get sober. Even the thought of wanting to get sober, of trying to go back there and trying to start over, I have a head that said, but if you just have one, right? It'll just a little ease, just a little comfort, right? It'll help take away that. I think they call it anxiety now, right? Like, it'll help with that. So I take one drink, and then I'm back off to the races. And my parents, I hid it from them for a little while, until October 15th, 2007. I was driving home from work, and I should have never been driving home from work, and I was on an interstate, and I looked over, and there was a tractor trailer, and there was a motorcycle, and I thought, that's really weird. Why are they there? And then I felt a bump at the front of my dad's truck. And so I pulled over because I wasn't really sure what happened, and when I got out, there was a guy standing there, and he said, "You just hit somebody." And I ran over, and there was a man laying by the road, and I started to do CPR. I worked in a trauma center. I knew he was dead, but I had to try. And so I tried to do CPR on him. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm so selfish at this time that I'm thinking, I can't believe my life has come to this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. And the state police came, and they said, we got to find out who did this. And I told them the only honest thing that I told them that night, which was me. And they put me in the front seat of the police car, and they took me to the hospital to do the blood test, and then they took me to the state police department, and they let me go that night. They did not charge me that night. And I would love to tell you that I got sober at that point, but that's not my story. If I thought that my head was messed up before, now it's constant. Have another drink, do something, and I'm back off to the races. And for the next 8 months, I kept getting arrested over and over again. And I look back now, and I see that as like God kept saying, stop. You can stop at any time. But I couldn't stop. I remember on May 7th of 2008, and the only reason I remember that date was it's the day after my birthday. And I remember my birthday. I remember doing a lot of stuff on my birthday, and I woke up, and I'm in Orange, and there's bars. And I thought to myself, this is bad. Like, what did I mix last night? Because I'm not going to drink that again. Like, I'm not going to do that again. I can't get up. Like, you never have a bad dream and, like, you go to wake yourself up? I thought that's what it was. Well, it turns out I was in the Venango County Jail. And I remember all the charges that I had were all going through the system. So I could have been bailed out for $200. So they take me to the magistrate, and I call my mommy. And I said, hey, I need you to get me out of jail. It's $200. I need you to do it. And she said, you're in jail. We'll come see you at visiting hours. I love you. I'm going to sleep tonight. Goodbye. And she hung up the phone. I know, right? She didn't even go to Al-Anon or nothing. Like, she just intuitively knew. So, about a month later, it was 34 days to be exact, somebody else came and they bailed me out. And I remember at 34 days, so I believed the lie that I drank enough that I was physically sick. Like, I was physically dependent. If I didn't do something, I was going to be sick. And I don't like to be sick. I don't like to be uncomfortable. So I believed if I could just get over a sickness, that I'd be okay. So I'm in that jail. I'm no longer sick at 34 days. And I'd slept, like, by myself and woke up and, I thought, okay, I'm okay. This is good. Like, I'm all right. And so when I left there, I thought, I got this, right? I'm physically sober. That's all I need. I'm good to go. And it wasn't like, I was literally out the doors, and my mind was like, Heidi, 34 days? Dang, that's awesome. You haven't done 34 days in, God, a decade. You know what we should do? And I'm back off to the races. My parents were like, we're not going to watch you kill yourself. If you can't get sober, leave. You can't live here. And I said, you're right. I'm not staying here. And I got a tent, and I moved to the woods. Because, that's, a year before I'm living at the beach, and now I'm living in the woods. And there was a guy that had a garage, and he would, if it was raining or if it was bad, he would pull his car out, and I could sleep. Not like Airbnb. Like, this was like oil on like it was a real working garage. And he put like an egg mattress. I don't even know if they still make those anymore, right? Down, and I would sleep there. And then I met a woman who liked to drink like I like to drink, and I ended up moving into her house. And her house was in a nice neighborhood, so I thought, it's not so bad, right? There was food, there was alcohol, there was stuff. It was okay. And I remember taking a walk in the woods, because I love the woods. As a kid, I used to walk through the woods, and I would sing songs to God. I can't sing a lick, but I loved. it was just like I felt close to God in the woods. And so I'm taking a walk, and I realized that, I would drink and it would stop that chatter in my head. Do you guys have that chat? Did you guys ever have that chatter? That you're not good enough. You're never going to make it. Nobody loves you. And it would stop the chatter. That's why I like to drink, because it would stop the chatter. I could just breathe. And as I was walking through the woods, I realized that it didn't work anymore. It didn't matter how much I drank or did anything else, that the chatter never stopped. And it was like I couldn't live with it, and I couldn't live without it. And I just said, God, please take me, because I'm done. I can't do this anymore. My life is a wreck. It's never going to get any better. Just take me. And then I waited, because I thought like thunderbolts or something would happen. And it didn't. And so now I'm kind of mad at God, right? Like, why can't you? And I go back to the house, and a little while later, there was a loud knock on the door. And I don't know if you guys have ever had loud knocks at your door. And because I had all those charges, I had a probation officer assigned to me. And she was there, and she did take me. She took me directly to the county jail. And that was June 10th, 2009, and I haven't had to have a drink or anything else since then. And I look back now, and I think I did ask God to take me. I mean, and isn't that true? Like, I pray prayers, and they get answered, just usually not in the way that I think, right? And, when I went through the book, I realized that's one of the ways that I tried to play God. Like, I would pray, but I never was like, your will, not mine, be done. I was like, this is how I want it done. This is the color that I would like it to be in. I mean, I was very specific with my prayers. And so anyway, so I'm in the county jail. There was a couple county jails I had to go to. I got to know the sheriffs really well. But this one, there was a chaplain, and he had studied Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had studied the Oxford group, and he saw that there was these 6 steps with the Oxford group. He said, I've got this Oxford group steps. Anybody that wants to do these steps, I'll help you with them. And at that point, I was like, I'll do anything you want. Because when I first got to jail, I'd tried to kill myself, and I couldn't figure it out. And so my head, again, is even like, you screw that up. Like, you can't even do that right. Like, so I said, I'll do whatever you want. Like, I'll whatever. I can't, get me out of here. Like, I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life in jail. I just can't, my head, just make it stop. And so I started doing those steps, and I guess I started to change, because they let me out on house arrest, which was kind of unheard of for the charges that I had. But part of what I had to do on house arrest was I was court ordered. I had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, it wasn't that I wasn't familiar with AA. AA did come into the jails that I was in, and they would come in, and they would look pretty, and they would smell good, and they would talk about their life, and I would think, you're not like me. Like, you didn't go to the lengths that I went to. Of course you got your life. What? You probably just got drunk in a bar on a weekend. Like, it's not that whatever. So I was unwilling. Like, I was closed-minded, and I was unwilling to hear what they had to say when they were in the jail. So anyway, so I have to go to AA, and I'm afraid. Like, I didn't know the extent of the fear that I had. So much so that I actually called the house arrest officer, and I lied, and I didn't go to that first AA meeting I was supposed to go to. And she told me if I didn't get my together, that I better change. She was very explicit with her language and 4-letter words, and she didn't understand. I tried to tell her how I felt, and she was like, she did not care about my feelings at all. She told me I had to go. Or I was going back to jail, and I thought, okay, fine. So I go to this AA meeting, and it was like, when we walk in here, like that AA music that is before the meeting, like I could hear it. Now, where this meeting was is in this little, I live in a little town, right? So this little place, but you have to walk up these dark stairs in order to get to the meeting. And no one's greeting you at the bottom of the dark stairs. But I hear this music that, like, I don't know, calls me in. And so I walk up the stairs, and I sit down, and there's like a bunch of old white men around a table with a blue book. And I didn't know. I thought I didn't know. And so as soon as I sat down, they started talking, and I started crying. And I don't know if it was tears of relief or tears that I was actually there. Like, I don't know, but I felt something in that room. And after the meeting, one of those guys said to me, Heidi, here's the number of 2 women. Call them. They'll help you. And then he said to me, and please keep coming back. And I remember I started crying again because I thought, man, like, people haven't asked me to come back in a really long time. Now, I would have told you that I had friends prior to all of this stuff happening, but my friends left me, you know. When the going gets tough, your friends leave. But upon, further investigation through inventory, I found that my friends never left me. Like, I was the one that abandoned them. I had friends that would invite me places, and if I showed up, I was loaded and would make a jerk of myself. Or they would invite me to their house, and I would steal from them, right? I'd steal from their liquor cabinet, their medicine cabinet, whatever it is that I needed. I thought that it was mine. And if I steal from you, then I can't talk to you again because, you'll know that I stole. And so really, my friends never abandoned me. I abandoned all my friends, So I go home, and I called those women, and the one woman said, tell me what meetings you want to go to. And when you're on house arrest in Pennsylvania, you can get out of the house 6 days a week. And so just so happened there's 6 meetings in the town I live in a week. So we went to all the meetings, and we would have a meeting on the way to the meeting and one on the way back. And I ended up asking that first woman to be my sponsor. And if you think God doesn't have a sense of humor, I had a great big ankle bracelet, for house arrest. And I come to find out I asked her to be my sponsor. She was a retired correctional officer. Can't make that stuff up. And so we, because I'd done those steps with the chaplain, I knew that 9th step said that we make direct amends, right, to the people we harm. So she and I started working the steps, and it's funny, I had all those charges, and prior to going to AA, I was not guilty forever. I was pleading not guilty because it was, not my fault for sure. I come hang around with you guys for a couple of months, and I had to change all those pleas to guilty because it turns out I was really guilty, And so I had guilt, and I had sentencing for the things that I had pled guilty for, and the one was that man's death. And I knew that his family was going to be in the courtroom the day that I was going to plead for sentencing, and I knew that I may not have another chance. And our book says, do we make direct amends? And I knew I had to make direct amends to them. And so that day I walked into the courtroom, a couple of things happened. Me with no friends walked in. It's a big courtroom, maybe not as big as the room here, but it was filled with people from Alcoholics Anonymous. When it came time for my sentencing, the judge said, do you have anything to say for yourself? And I said, no, I have nothing to say, but I would like to talk to them. And I had written a letter of amends to them. And so I read that letter of amends in open court because I didn't know when I would see them again. And I told them that, sorry is not even a word that I could have used, and that I would say that I would tell this story anywhere that I've been asked to tell it so that maybe somebody else wouldn't suffer in the way that I'd made them suffer. And I've kept that. I've kept that amend. Anywhere I've been asked to speak, I've spoken, whether it's in schools, universities, or AA meetings, or upstairs or downstairs in churches. In Pennsylvania, if you have a vehicular homicide DUI, it's a 3-year mandatory state penitentiary sentence, which I thought was not enough, really. I thought I should have gone to jail for a lot longer. And what happened that day in the courtroom is after I said that to that man's family, the judge asked them if he could separate the charges. And that man's family said yes. And what happened was the judge could sentence me to whatever he wanted, and he sentenced me to 10 to 24 months in the county jail. And I look at that, and it's grace. I did not deserve that. I did not deserve that at all. When I was in jail, I was in jail for 180 days that time, and where I'm from, they give out these little serenity cards. They, if somebody's in jail or rehab or sick, they, send cards, and I had 180 cards. I got a card every single day from you guys. So much so that when I got out, I couldn't help but come back to you. I had to, right? While I was in jail, I was on work release, and I ended up meeting a guy. Usually that's the best place to meet your soulmate is on work release. And so So I meet this guy, and I tell my sponsor, I met this guy. I'm out now, out of work release, and she said, I think we should do some inventory on why you think you can't be alone. Now, I didn't have enough time to tell you that I'd been married prior to this, and I divorced him while I was in jail, and then I meet a new one on work release. She's like, you clearly need to do inventory on why you can't be alone. And I said, that is a great idea. I'm going to get my tablet out, and I'll call you back. And instead what I did is I got pregnant and moved him in. I don't recommend it. I don't. But I did do that inventory later, and what I found out was I didn't have a fear of being alone, but what I had a fear of is I had a fear of what I thought you thought of me, because I thought that my identity was absolutely wrapped in who I had by my side. If I wasn't somebody's girlfriend or somebody's wife, if I didn't have the car, if I didn't have the house, everything that I was wrapped in on outside things. And what you taught me here is that I am a beloved child of God, that he is my employer, that he is the principal and I am his agent, that it has nothing to do with outside stuff. And it took me years to be able to figure that out. And so anyway, so I get married. We did end up, so I got pregnant, then married, the alcoholic way. And then I got pregnant again. And things got good, relatively good to the way compared to what my life was like. I went back to school. I had a job. I got pregnant again. And I was told that I remember going to the doctor when I got pregnant with my son, and they started talking about all this stuff that could happen. And I started to get really scared. And so I remember going to my home group, and they would say, it was a 12 and 12 meeting, and unless somebody had a topic. And I remember I would raise my hand every week, and I would have a topic, me, because I was afraid. And they were so patient, and they were kind, and they would say that, there's prayers in the big book. We ask God to remove our fear and remind us of who he would have us to be. And they would say, stay in today, and because it was hard for me to stay in today. I like to go into the future where I've planned all the horrible things that are going to happen. And they told me God's not in that future, which is very true, right? And so I would go back again and again, and I would need you guys to remind me of those things. And so you would remind me. Oh, you also told me to write gratitude lists. Do you guys do that here? Man, I thought, this is stupid. My sponsor got to the point where I would call her to complain, and she would say, did you write a gratitude list today? And I'd say, no. And she'd say, well, call me when you get one written. And she would hang up on me. She didn't understand. I don't get it. Anyway, I digress. So on February 16th, 2013, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And 8 hours later, I was holding that baby boy as he died in my arms. And I'll tell you, for that 8 hours, I got to be his mom. I got to pray with him. I got to sing to him. I got to be his mom. I died a couple of times that night. I was in intensive care. And so when it came time to take him to the funeral home, I couldn't be there, but I'll tell you who was with me in the ICU was Alcoholics Anonymous while my family went to the funeral home. When I left that hospital, I intuitively knew that I needed to go to grief counseling, and my family is not a counseling kind of family, it's a suck it up buttercup, let's just go kind of family, but I intuitively knew, and so I ended up going to grief counseling for the next year, and I'll tell you, grief counseling is really great for grief. But what happened with me is there's a fine line between grief and self-pity, and I crossed it, and I was into that self-pity. My husband at the time, he did not choose to have the same kind of support that I did with Alcoholics Anonymous, and he ended up going back out. I remember he told me that what he did is he went to work. And he worked a lot. He thought he could just work a lot. And he was at work, and somebody offered him something to help him stay awake, and he took it. And I remember I said to him, I drink coffee. What do you mean? I couldn't believe that he would take something. Doesn't he know how I'm suffering? Doesn't he know our daughter needs him too? I was so self-centered, and so I just couldn't believe it, and I remember writing inventory about that, and what happened was I believed the lie that his love for us should have been stronger than that pool, right, than that alcoholism. But I realized that my love for my parents never stopped me from picking up, And I got over that lie. Every resentment I have is usually fueled by a fear and a lie. And when I got over that, I was able to have empathy for him. I was able to be sad instead of mad. I still filed for divorce, but because I couldn't do it. I couldn't live with somebody that was actively using and have a child at home. And so now I'm a single mom, and I'm working at this doctor's office, which was kind of crazy because I have a felony, and there's really no way that I should have been able to work in the medical field. But the doctor heard this story, and he said, I can see a change in your life. Like, we need people like you. So much so that they gave me an office, and when somebody like us would come in, he would bring the patient to my office, and he would say, hey, Heidi, you talk to him. And he'd shut the door. And I would have these little big books, like the little big books, and I would have meeting lists with men and women, and I would give it to them. And I remember I was at a meeting a couple years ago, and this guy said, we were talking about big books, and he said, I was at my doctor's office, and there was this little blonde that gave me my first big book. And I didn't remember giving it to him. It's crazy. So at this time, I'm back in my home group, and at that point, I'd been going to maybe 1 or 2 meetings a week. I thought that's all I really needed, right? I'd been through the steps, quote unquote, I didn't realize it was so I'm at my home group, and I must have said something crazy. I'm sure I probably did, just spouted off something. And there was a guy in my home group, and he pulled me aside afterwards, and he said, hey, Heidi, there's some prayers in the big book. You should try them. And I remember thinking in my inside voice in my head, I went to seminary. I'm pretty sure I know how to pray. But I didn't say it out loud, right? So I go home, and that's I'm just playing it over in my head, like what I should have said, right? Back and forth. But then I thought, maybe there's something to it. So I find my big book. Notice I said find my big book, because I really didn't think, once you've been through it, once you've read it, and let me be honest, once you've leafed through the pages that your sponsor told you to read, right, what do you need it for anymore? I've been sober 7 years. What did I need it? So I find my big book, and on page 86, there's some prayers. And I was like, these aren't bad. We ask in the morning upon awakening, we ask God to direct our thoughts. I was like, all right, I'm down with that, right? We ask that they be divorced from self-pity. And I kind of stopped right there because I realized just how full of self-pity I was, right? That dishonest and self-seeking motives. And so I would do that every day, and then at night there was a nightly review, and so I would look at that. And that's all I did for the next week. Nothing more, nothing less, just did those prayers. And something changed inside. Still a single mom working this job that I don't make enough money to pay my bills, but something changed on the inside. And I remember going back to that meeting, and I was like, who told you about this stuff? And where can I find more? It was like I had tasted something that I needed more of. And so I ended up, there's these workshops, tapers. I think you're taping tonight. And I'm so grateful that people tape workshops and tape these things, because there was a workshop that our friend Scott L., that you guys got to meet last month, Scott L. and Bob D. did, and it was a 10-hour workshop through the book. And I remember getting out my book, getting a notebook and a highlighter, and I just went back to the very beginning of the book, and if it said to write something, I wrote it. If it said to pray it, I prayed it. If it said to observe it, and things started to change, really change in my life. Now, at this same time, I had a problem with my neck. I could not move my head to the left or to the right. I'd been to all these doctors, and they finally decided that I have an extra cervical vertebrae in the back of my neck that's impeding on the nerves and the arteries. You guys are already starting to feel sorry for me. I can see it. And that's why I had so much pain. And the only way to get it better would be to cut out that piece of cervical vertebrae. And I was like, fantastic. I like general anesthetic. Let's do it. Let's do it. And I go to my home group, and I say to that home group member, I'm gonna get this surgery. I'm not gonna be in pain anymore. And he looked at me, and he said, Heidi, do you have any unmade amends? And I was like, no, I've made amends to ex-husbands, their families, everybody, except for the IRS. And you can't possibly want me to call the IRS. I owe them $100,000. There's no way. Wesley Snipes just went to prison for less than I owe. And it just came out real quick. And he looked at me, and he said, how free do you want to be? And then walked away, dismissed me. And I'll tell you, I'll show you. right? I thought to myself, fine, I'll call the IRS. I'll go to federal prison. Now my daughter will be without a father and a mother. I'll show you. You can't play with the feds, right? And so and it's not that I didn't want to make amends to the IRS. I had tried in those years prior. I was afraid. I was so afraid because I was sure I was going to go to federal prison, right? So I ended up calling them, and I said, look, I need to make a payment plan. And they're like, okay, great. What can you pay? And I said, $20 a month. And they laughed at me, too. And I had to give them all my stuff. And by the end, the woman was kind of on my side. She's like, I have to give this to my supervisor, but we'll see. And so I hang up, and I'm like, okay, whatever, give it to God. But I literally woke up the next day and thought the feds would be in my driveway. That's really what I thought would happen, So 2 weeks go by, and I go to get the mail, and 2 things are in the mail: my final divorce papers for my kid's dad and a letter from the IRS. Now, it's not that the IRS had not corresponded with me in years prior. They would send me mail, and I would sometimes look at it. Sometimes it'd go in a drawer. Usually it would just go straight to the garbage because I didn't really need to hear what they had to say. And, our book talks about a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, how it's a different change of mind and attitude and action, right? Well, right there on my porch, I had a spiritual experience because I opened that letter and I read it. And what it said was, we'll take your $20 a month payment plan. We'll even send you an envelope every month so that we get our money. And I remember going to a meeting that night and talking about grace again because I don't deserve this. I don't deserve it. And I went home and I went to bed that night. I put my pajamas on and I could move my neck. And I was astounded. So I call up that home group member. I'm like, you are not going to believe this. I can move my neck. And he said, Heidi, of course you can. There's a promise in the big book. When the spiritual malady is overcome, so is the physical and the mental. Of course you can. There's a big difference between making all but one of your amends and all of your amends. And I remember hanging up the phone and I thought, he is smart and cute. I should marry him. It took me a couple years to convince him, but we are happily married today. So, I'm not saying if you have, if you make all your amends, you get a husband in Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And, it says, we abandon ourselves. We know that our primary purpose is Alcoholics Anonymous. We know that, the still suffering alcoholics comes first. That's why I'm here, right? Like, you guys call, and I say yes, and he's home with my daughter. Our daughter's 13, and she, oh, my gosh, she's in middle school, right? And I thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous, because this just happened not long ago. She was with some friends, and the friends were going to have a sleepover, the 2 of them, and they didn't invite my daughter. I know. That's how I felt, too. So she comes home. She tells me about it. I said, oh, let's talk, and I'm thinking I had some friends in Alcoholics Anonymous that did that to me. They left me out of the plans, too. I know what to do about this. So we're talking, and then she says, I bet they just wanted to spend the night together. It didn't really have anything to do with me at all, Mom. All right, I'll talk to you later. I'm going up to my room. And I was like, I had to call my sponsor, write 3 inventories. I'm still praying for them. What happened, right? But thank you, AA, right? It was because of you guys. We abandoned ourselves. I moved to California at one point, sold everything that I owned to move to California because I wanted to work for this little place called the Midnight Mission. I don't know if you guys have heard of Clancy or the Midnight Mission in downtown LA, but I had a heart for it, and so we sold everything we owned and we moved there to so I could maybe get a job at the Midnight Mission, and I did. I got a job, and then this little thing called COVID hit. I started there on March 5th of 2020, so if that tells you anything. And the whole world went crazy, and we ended up having to move back to Pennsylvania. And by the grace of God, I remember I went in and I told my boss that I was going to leave, and she said, you've already been working at home half time. Why don't you just continue to work with us? And so I get to continue to work for the Midnight Mission. All my life I wanted to write, and even as a little kid, I wrote a book and sent it to a publisher. They sent it back and said, try again later. And today I get to be the communications manager for the Midnight Mission. I get paid to write people's stories, people like us. I get paid to write our stories, and like, how blessed am I? We moved home, and I didn't have a driver's license, because I lost my license. Supposed to lose it for 16 years, and when I moved home in 2020, I had another part-time job that I was working at, and my boss was a real advocate for me. He was friends with the state representative, and he went to the state representative, and he said, this woman, 13 years, she hasn't driven. She hasn't, like, how long do you make people pay? Like, what, they've turned their lives around. How long do you make people pay? And so he advocated for me, which was really crazy because his dad was killed by a drunk driver when he was 2 years old. He grew up without a father. But yet he saw what Alcoholics Anonymous had done in my life. And so on October 15th of 2020, 13 years to the day of that accident, I got my driver's license back, which was really crazy. Now, when I drove around, at first I had to have this Intoxilock. I don't know if you guys have those here. You have to, okay, good. So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So one of my fears was, what if my daughter, like, I'd never driven the whole time she was alive, and then I get my driver's license, she's got friends, and I thought, I wonder what her parents, like, the parents will think. Like, now I'm driving, and they didn't care. But I'm driving, and it goes off, and I'm blowing in it, and she's in the back seat with her friend, and her friend's like, Miss Heidi, what is that? And without a beat, my daughter looks at her, and she said, oh, Jenna, my mom, a long time ago, she drank, and she killed somebody, and so she hasn't been able to drive since then. But she has to blow into it to make sure that she's not drunk, but don't worry, she's been sober since, like, before I was born. And Jenna went, cool. And I share that story because that's our life today. Like, we live our lives out loud. Like, we are authentic. We are, not like press, film, or anything, but I'm real, like, if people want to help, they know where to come. Like, they know our story. I'm not a hiding Alcoholics Anonymous person. I am happy that you guys have shown me how to recover, I get to go back into that same jail. As a matter of fact, yesterday, I had an appointment with the warden on purpose yesterday in that exact same jail. And so a friend of mine, we're going to start taking 12-step workshops into the jail once a month and try to help people, help them through the steps like I was helped through the steps. I'd rotated through the jail, and I do the steps, and I haven't had to go back. Like, it's crazy thing, So I also, on Tuesdays, I get to go to the rehab. I love going to the rehab. I love going to show these women. As a matter of fact, I was there this past Tuesday. I said, what do you guys want to talk about? And one woman said, step 4. I said, really? She's like, I've been writing all about myself. I said, oh, honey, that's your problem. But I love to watch the light come on in people's eyes, I love to watch people see people like me that just wanted to fit in. What I realized through Alcoholics Anonymous is that I don't need to fit in, but you taught me that I belong, right? That I belong. I don't just belong here in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I belong in this world. I belong in God's world. Like, all those circumstances, all that stuff that it looks like that I went through, every single one of them I've been able to use to help somebody else. And only in God's economy can that happen, right? So I belong here, and you belong. If you're new, you belong here. You absolutely belong here. I thought that if you could just love me enough that I would be okay. But what you guys showed me was that if I can love you, that everything is right with the world. And so I want to thank you that I got to come here and I got to feel your love tonight.